Hello, this is Module 6.2.1, Population Growth. I'm going to explain to you a few of the basic terms associated with the growth of any population, and then we'll look at a couple of models. The first term that we're going to consider under the topic of population growth is something called biotic potential. As you can see on your screen, biotic potential means the capacity of a species or of a population to grow. We can also think of it as the maximum rate of growth with unlimited resources. This is a hypothetical consideration only because there are always limits to population growth. Let me give you an example of biotic potential. One gravid fly, which is a female who is what you might consider pregnant, she has eggs, fertilized eggs. So one gravid fly could become 5.6 trillion flies in 13 months if they all grew up and reproduced. And now the average fly weighs 12 milligrams, and 5.6 trillion flies would weigh 6.72 times 10 to the 10th kilograms, and the Earth weighs 5.97 times 10 to the 24th kilograms. So, in other words, one fly could potentially grow to be a substantial proportion of the Earth's mass in just over a year. And so this just shows you what we're talking about with biotic potential. Let me give you a couple more terms. The first of these would be environmental resistance. Now, we know that most organisms don't realize their biotic potential, and the reasons they don't, not one reason, but many reasons they don't, we can sum up as environmental resistance. And environmental resistance it can be called the sum of all factors that limit population growth. Now, there would be non-living factors, which could be called abiotic factors, because the temperature is too hot, too cold, it's non-optimal. We could say the same for the pH or for the concentration. We could talk about biotic factors. There may not be enough food, there may be too much competition, there may be predation. All these things contribute to environmental resistance. Of course, disease as well, which I didn't specifically mention, but I didn't mention all the possible factors. But understand that the term means everything that prevents a species from realizing its biotic potential. A second term that you should know in association, actually it's a third term, but an additional term that you should know in association with the concept of population growth is the concept of carrying capacity. Now, carrying capacity is a population size that can be sustainably supported by a particular area of habitat. Now, those words are one thing, but it would help if we gave you an example. Let's consider the carrying capacity of 1 acre of desert grassland here in Cochise County. And because this is based on a population, that means that carrying capacity is species specific. So on our 1 acre, let's consider how many cows that we can sustainably support. It turns out that maybe we can only support half a cow, and that's on pretty good grassland down here. It would actually be maybe a quarter of a cow or something like that. But we're going to say it's half a cow, which is to say that you'd need 2 acres to support 1 cow in a sustainable way. Now, sustainable is an important part of this definition, just as population, which is species specific, is. Sustainable means, or sustainably means, that it can support that many this year and every year on into the future. And so, if we consider that same acre of desert grassland, and we ask ourselves the question, well, what is the carrying capacity of that acre of grassland for grasshoppers? Now, grasshoppers are different than cows. Remember, the carrying capacity for cows was half a cow per acre. And for grasshoppers, it might be several hundred or several thousand per acre. And so we can see that it is indeed a species-specific concept. And so we can apply it to different species. Okay, now that we've given you those 3 definitions, biotic potential, environmental resistance, and carrying capacity, let's look at a couple of models. This actually, in graphical form, displays two models of population growth. The exponential model and the logistic model. The red curve is the exponential model. The blue curve is the logistic growth model. And so, although these show derivatives, we're not going to do any calculus, and we're not going to really do any quantification or calculation. But I just want you to be familiar with these two types of models. So, the exponential growth curve or exponential growth model, the curve is J-shaped, and that's what we saw on this red one. You can see it starts kind of slowly, but then it gets going, and then it goes up very rapidly. And you can even grow faster at the beginning if there are a few resource limitations, but the initial population is small, and that's why the growth is slow. And the logistic growth curve, it's S-shaped. I guess that's kind of a flattened S, that blue curve there. In any case, it starts slow and it grows faster, but when the population reaches a certain level, then it starts to level off. And it levels off at that number, which is carrying capacity. Recall that carrying capacity is a number, so it's a certain population size. And so we can look at a couple, an example here. This is logistic growth of sheep on the island of Tasmania. Tasmania is one of the states of Australia, and we can see that it goes up pretty quickly, but then it overshoots, and then it will gradually converge upon the carrying capacity of sheep. And one of the things to remember, they're saying the carrying capacity is somewhere around 1.5 million sheep. Well, that comes at the expense of many natural species. Sheep are not native to Tasmania. Now, what happens if a population exceeds its carrying capacity? Well, the population will crash unless it can switch to a new resource or move to another area. And so that's why carrying capacity should be respected, because what we just say very easily, the population crashes, this involves a lot of suffering and death, and it's horrible. And so it's certainly not something in terms of human ethics that we consider not to be a big deal. It is a big deal. The example I'm going to give you is of humans. The Great Potato Famine in Ireland in 1845. Potatoes were a New World crop, but they quickly became the staple crop of Ireland. That is, most of the calories to feed most of the people came from potatoes. But then we had the potato blight, a fungal disease, and it destroyed the potato crop over a couple of very wet years. And something like 1 million people died and 1 million people migrated to other countries. And so this shows you that it was indeed a dire thing. So when we apply these concepts to humans, we get a little bit different perspective. Now, an important thing to recognize is an important question to ask, and then we'll recognize the fact. The important question is, what is the carrying capacity of the earth for human beings? And the answer is, it depends. At what level of resource use do you want to live? We can support a lot more humans if we all just are going to wear a gunny sack and eat a handful of rice each day. But if we're going to live like Americans, we have already exceeded the carrying capacity of the earth by a long shot. But we have, and here's the fact that we should realize, we have artificially increased the carrying capacity of the earth for humans through technology and social and cultural changes. And one thing that you should recognize is what culture is. Culture is the non-genetic transmission of information. This is something that humans excel at. Our culture is unparalleled on this planet in terms of development. And so that's something to remember as we apply these ideas to humans. And that will be our next module. We'll be talking about human population.